see Peter's coming on now, so I think that we'll get started and Kathleen will join us already in progress. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Tonight, for the Pledge of Allegiance, for the first time, we have our Connecticut Distinguished Teacher nominee, Erin Montague, guidance counselor from Western Middle School and student helper extraordinaire with us to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And she says she knows the words. So with that, Erin, we're going to turn it over to you.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Erin, thank you very much. We're so glad you could join us to do that, mainly because I stumble through it at each meeting. So truly appreciate your coming, and we're glad you're our nominee, and good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. With that, we'll move on to the next item of our agenda, which is the approval of the meeting agenda. Just a couple of things to note before we take that up. First is we dispensed with our budget adjustments on Tuesday. So when that item comes up, we'll take a motion to postpone that indefinitely, considering we've already taken the item up. The other is transfers. Mr. O'Keefe informed me that he's not ready with the transfers. It seems he's been busy with the budget adjustments and the encumbrances. So we will deal with that at a future meeting, or the executive committee can deal with that over the summer as needed. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the meeting agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second it. It's Karen Hirsch.
All right, second from Ms. Hirsch. All right, so we'll take a roll call vote. All those in favor of the meeting agenda, Bernstein is a yes. I don't believe Stowe is on yet. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, just very briefly, for those of you joining us for our virtual Board of Ed meeting, it's being conducted pursuant to the Governor's Order 7B. It's a special meeting. Meeting's going to be posted on YouTube when we're done. So if your friends are missing it, you can let them know and they can watch it later. Just a couple of ground rules. The agenda's on our board docs website. You can get there from the Greenwich Schools website. It's a special meeting, so we're not taking public comment. It's a discussion between the superintendent and the board and her cabinet. Members of the community, of course, can send emails at any time for public comment to all of the Board of Ed members by a single email address. That's boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. Again, it's boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. I'm going to ask the participants to state their name before they speak. We're going to use the raise the hand function, so I'll try to announce you every time. And I'd ask we try to keep our comments concise. And we'll be using roll call for our voting. So with that, we're going to turn to the first item on the agenda, which is a discussion item, the special education audit. So Dr. Jones, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. What you have on board docs tonight is the timeline that we're working on. We do want to get this RFP issued. We have the draft already done. It's really making sure that the components of what's inside what we're going to be requesting, the responders to actually provide for us when they respond to the RFP. And there's the referral process and data collection is the first section. I have had a few suggestions today. One of them was to add the Ieee, independent evaluations. How many do we get those before or after we've already done our own assessments? That was a suggestion in that area. On the performance of students with disabilities, again, that's looking at things like graduation and dropout rates. Those are pretty typical that you'll find in almost any study. It's just, are we on par with where we would expect to be? And let me even back up a little bit and say, I pulled studies from all around the country just to make sure I wasn't missing an area and cross-referenced and looked because Mr. Bernstein has talked about soup to nuts. And so I wanted to make sure we were trying to get everything in. The next section is program costs. And this really, these two programs are on here because they're ones the board has specifically mentioned. Do we run our ESY as a cost-effective program and in the best way to provide services for families and children? And also looking at our special education preschool. As you know, we've made some adjustments even within our own budget. So we will, but I think it's worth having them still look at that. The board was interested. Also looking at instructional practices. This is the systems of support that we have for children, inclusion, pull-out, resource rooms. Are we providing, the very best for 21st century systems of support? The unique learning needs for children, behavioral supports. Tiered system of support is one that one of the board members pointed out. That is the same thing as RTI or MTSS. It changes names from district to district, and we've changed within our own district. So that is RTI generally around the country is what it's called. Looking at the professional development for special educators, general educators, the support, that's kind of what kind of training have we offered? Are we offering the right kind of training so that our general education teachers, for instance, feel very comfortable working with children from that have unique learning needs. Transitioning for post-high school. Again, these are all those instructional practices. Another suggestion in that area was looking at how do we support students when they are exited from special education to follow up and make sure that they're in fact being successful. And I think that's a great suggestion. Staffing, looking at just in general, how do we conduct or go through the staffing process for special education to meet our staffing needs, and looking at our staffing review from pre-K all the way through post-high school. And along with that, having interviews with focus groups so that they're hearing from staff, students, families, and the community. Also classroom and some school observational visits so they can see, what our classrooms look like and really get a kind of hands-on approach to how we are providing services. And another suggestion was also making sure that in part of that focus group, do parents feel like the goals in their child's, IEP, that they feel like we are challenging children to really try to grow, and how we go about that kind of goal setting process. So those are the key areas. And again, what happens is we put those in the RFP, and those people who are responding know these are all the different areas we're going to want them to be looking at. And we hope that we're engaging the firm August, September, October, of course, if COVID allows, so that we're getting information kind of back as quickly as possible. These can take all year long by the time they are on site, gathering data, taking time to analyze it, and then just getting the write-up done. So it probably will be a long process. So that's where we are. So if anybody has questions, I actually got feedback really from one board member, and it was very, very helpful. So if anybody had something that they were thinking of and they didn't send it, I'd like to hear it.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
So I wanted to thank you for taking some of my questions and suggestions to heart, and what we do when we look at our audit, and especially when it comes to budget. Would love to just do a little bit further in depth. I know you said that you would on all of our programs costs, as well as what we spend for educational delivery in that area, as well as how our staffing is being planned. The one other area that I know that you didn't mention that I know we had spoken about was the family support, what we do to support our families while their children are receiving services. During their meetings, they only get one a year. Is that enough? Do our parents feel supported so that they can support their learners at home with with learning differences and whatnot? So I wanted to make sure that we could add that as well. And I appreciate that you're adding something on the transition out of the program, because I know a lot of students that are transitioned out at the elementary level don't always get the same kind of level of support that they do have in their program, and sometimes have a backward slide. So it's kind of important to know that as well. I guess the one other question I had asked, I was going to ask was, are we going to be looking at any of the recent complaints that have been filed or anything else to see how we can better address the needs of our community?
Yeah, on the first section, the referral process and data collection, from the way it was written, it's that number 8, looking at the state complaint process, our data collection and analyzing what has gone to the state, what those results have been, how many have been filed, and what are the results. And so that's where I saw that piece coming in.
Fantastic. I may have some other thoughts going forward, but I really do appreciate your taking all of the feedback and questions and suggestions to heart. And I also just wanted to say an extra, since the meeting has started, congratulations to our state nominee for Teacher of the Year, Erin Montague. She's one of a kind and truly deserving. So just wanted to say congratulations if she's still on.
Yeah.
I'd normally call you out of order, but thank you to Erin. All right, Miss Olson.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I just, there's been issues before with conflict of interest when we've done sort of different types of special education reviews with Mary Ford or people that are associated with Mary Ford. You don't really have the administrators themselves review themselves or people with whom they have a conflict of interest. So I just wanted to confirm and make sure that there is nobody that will be involved in this special education review that could possibly have a conflict of interest with Mary Ford. I think that's important to know.
Yeah, and I think it's not only just Mary, it's having a conflict of interest with any of us, because they're going to come in and we want people who are going to give us an independent review. So absolutely, that's part of that RFP process, and making sure, and not only that they're independent, but they also know special ed. Making sure that we also have a firm that has done this work before. It's not just like an offset from an educational consultant where it's not kind of a bulk of their work. So that's the intent with the RFP, is to make sure that it is really, it's a process that is, has integrity to it, and that we don't work with them previously, or they don't do consulting work or anything like that for us right now.
Because that has been an issue in the past, and I just want to put that out there, make sure that's public, and make sure that going forward that won't be an issue with this review.
Yeah, we were expecting it to be an independent review. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Miss Downey.
Okay, I think one of these follows up on what Karen just said about our program costs, our delivery model, not just the extended school year and the preschool, but like our existing delivery model and the costs associated with that. And I don't know if they can really do an analysis of our out of district costs, but I think given that that's come up over and over again, to the extent it can be included in the analysis, in some form. I think the timetable you've laid out is fabulous. I think everything we can do to stay on that timetable to get a report by November should remain the goal, because that's the only way we're going to be able to incorporate any of this into the budget for the following year. So I think that's a great plan, and whatever you need from us to move that along, please let us know, because I really think we're all anxious to get it done thoroughly, but also expeditiously.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Mr. Scher.
Tony, I had a hard time a little bit following the document. So if it's already covered by what I'm about to say, just if we can be sure it's included. When this thing originally came up, I think we were sitting at Hamilton Avenue School. This is probably 2-3 years ago now. And we were saying that we needed a review. I'm thinking of bigger strategic items rather than just punch list items. I think we need a review that comments on what is the benchmark state of the art today in addressing kids who have special education needs. I have a sense from talking anecdotally to people who are in this, particularly people in the private schools that have popped up that serve this market so well. They probably serve it well because public schools are providing that marketplace for them. That their general comment is a lot of the models that we are employing in other school districts like us, we're not alone, is really kind of 1980s, 1990s, maybe even 1970s. So I think it's important that we're educated through this on what the state-of-the-art models are that lead to success for different types of special ed kids. And I think it's important that a consultant describes that to us. And then if that's a future state that we're interested in having, I think this needs a conversation, an education conversation with the board because it's really a governance issue as much as it is an issue, so that then we can have input to that, and then they can think of that as an ideal future state of someplace we want to go. And then if they can describe that as a gap between where we are and what that future state might look like. So I think I wrote it down as state-of-the-art model for special education delivery. That's what I call it. But I tried to give you that description. I noticed in here there's kind of be this focus on ESY and on preschool. To me, that is tangential. I've said before, I think we need to major on the majors, not major on the minors. And I think we need to come out of this with a complete picture of all the costs associated with special education in total. And I'd like to understand how that benchmarks against other districts. You know, are we spending not enough? Are we spending just about the right amount? Are we spending too much? You know, how do we kind of stack up, and what's appropriate in terms of spending? And I'm thinking total spending, not just Mary's direct department. We have a lot of things around it, you know, psychologists, social work, all kinds of different things around it. However that gets defined, I would hope we would be able to get a total and clear picture of what we're spending and how it's being spent. And the last part, to Ms. Downey's point, I think it's important that we have a review on that, particularly out of district placements, separate from settlements. I'm very out of district placements. I mean, I think we've had a little bit of an education in that, and I'm interested in hearing the special ed consultants, you know, give us views on how that ought to be dealt with. But to me, as my understanding is, that's not a votable item, and we need to educate the public that out of district placements are not a votable item. But settlements is a completely, that may lead to a placement outside of our district. That's more choice by us, or the result of some kind of mediation or litigation. That's the other half of that budget. And it would be very interesting to me to have the consultant focus on those, however many there were. I think there were 30, 35 of those, and give us a point of view on those. You know, did we do those correctly, or was there an opportunity for a different outcome that would have been more supportive of the student, more supportive of the family, and not as costly to the district? So I don't know if that fits in your framework. I don't see it here specifically, but those are three big questions that I think if we completed the study and they weren't answered, I would view it as not comprehensive enough.
Yeah, Karen had actually asked a question earlier today about the budget, and my response to the all-in costs is that piece really comes through our budgeting process for 21-22, as far as giving the board all of that information about where the dollars are spent and how they're spent. Now, there are some areas that are harder to pull apart because they are, there are some components of the position that may be special ed and some that are sort of gen ed. But I think that the budget piece, that would be very unusual, just to look at the big roll up numbers and then pull them back apart. That I see that as part of the budget process. And I think Sean and I can give the board a little bit more granularity this year. We want to do that. So I think on the state of the art programming, I saw that one is coming in through, I'm trying to remember, it's on here somewhere, but I think we're on the same page, is that, are we offering the best programming for our children, you know, for all of our unique learners? And I totally agree with that. And I'm hoping that they'll really have that expertise to share with us. So I will say, if there's anything that the board wants to take off this list, that's also just as important, because as this list kept growing and growing, and as I'm adding to it, I have a little concern about cost, obviously, just because the more it grows and the more we want them, it's hours, and they have to be on site to do a lot of this work. So if we feel like extended school year and preschool was its own section in the budget book this year, you can open the page and see exactly what we're spending. If we don't feel like we need somebody to look at that, then I would love to take it off. So if there's anything that you think that's on here that is not of huge importance as far as from an audit or review piece, I would welcome that feedback as well.
Tony, just to follow up on the money part, I think you can look 2 or 3 years ago. So this is already done. There was a model construct done as part of the budget process 3 years ago. In this new budget format that got started under your predecessor, it kind of got thrown out. But there was already a program roll-up done. That allocation was already done, this percentage of that program, that percentage of that program. So I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
I would go look at that, and then I would fill in the current numbers, because that'll provide us a bridge, and that's something that other town bodies have already seen as well as the board.
Yeah.
The second thing is, just by way of feedback, the board 2 years ago asked for a review on ESY obligations and preschool and summer school. And the board already did some work on that. So I think there's some critical policy questions that come out of that. But unless everybody else thinks so, I would take that out of the scope. You know, because there was work already done on that. Unless the new batch of board members want to go fly over that target. Again, I'm with you. I'd focus on the core special ed program and the issues associated with that program and the costs associated with that program, and benchmarking us so we can adequately, without debate, explain what we're spending and why we're spending it to other parts of town government who are interested in understanding that. I would focus on the core. I wouldn't clutter it up with a bunch of other stuff that if you're looking to narrow the scope.
All right, so this is Peter Bernstein. So Peter, your recollection of 3 years ago is a pretty good one, but this actually goes back even further. We had a meeting way back when at Central Middle School where we got a report of a review done by CES. And I think we realized
I remember that one too.
Yeah, and we realized, the two of us, and I think others at the time, that there was a real need for an independent review. So this has been a very long time coming. I'm glad it got baked into our budget. I'm glad the money's protected. I do also worry, Tony, that we may not have enough money because of what we do want, which is, you know, I know you said soup to nuts. I think the other part of that I've said multiple times is this needs to be actionable. This is not a report that we're going to stick on a shelf and take no action on. We really are looking for those best practices. We really are looking for how do we stack up against them. I think of this as a risk assessment. This is what I do in the real world. You're measuring your risk and you're looking at your mitigation and control factors. And we really haven't done that in a very long time. You know, this truly does need to be independent. I'm sure you'll make sure that all of our staff know, you know, cooperation is expected, and that really this will help us. This will help us better serve our students, better communicate with parents. I think SEAC was a first step in that direction, and this is yet another one. A couple of things that jumped out at me. I don't know that we have a fantastic inventory of our legal requirements. Every time we've asked, we've gotten different explanations. I think we ought to have a repository of those in a usable format that can easily be updated as they change. One of the things that came to mind for me that I know we've heard a lot about is the timing of testing. When students are tested, there's a certain amount of time that those results are supposed to be completed and be shared. And time and again, we hear that that isn't done, and there's always a reason for it. I think we need to measure. We need to find the things that are measurable, and we need to measure them. And that's one that jumped out at me that needs to be there. In terms of pre-K and ESY, I think we know very well what the requirements are. We did have a discussion about them a couple of years ago, but we did not vote on them. There was no vote or action by the board. I would say pre-K we're pretty comfortable with. ESY is such a big component of the way that we do special education here. And it is a huge number of students that we have that extended school year built into their plans. And I think it really does deserve a look. I don't want to shortchange that at all. But I want to make sure that this truly is something that's going to be usable, that this is going to guide the work that we do going forward, so we can basically hit a reset on our program. Reset, refresh, whatever you want to call it. It's time to make a change in terms of delivery, how we identify delivery, and even exiting students out of the program as we can, because it is challenging for parents. It is challenging for administrators. It is absolutely challenging for our students. We need to make sure that they're getting the services they need and deserve. With that, Ms. Hirsch, I see your hand.
Oh, I was just going to address, I know that the preschool program, since you asked Dr. Jones, does an incredible job. I know obviously there's usually concerns when there's transition from the pre-K program, because there's a much smaller cohort of students to teacher than once they get to the kindergarten stage of their education. But I know ESY in general, we should not be taking off. It's a huge area of special education that I know that we really do need to sort of revamp and bring up to speed as well. So I don't necessarily know if we need an in-depth look at preschool. If you need to take something off, that would probably be my suggestion. So the other question I just wanted to see is, I know we talked also about this, is there's areas and programs that we don't offer for students with specific learning disabilities, learning differences. Apologize for my inability to speak this evening. So I just wanted to see if that was an area that we think that the audit might address as well. I know that there have been discussion over the course of the year about things that we might be able to bring back into our programs, so that we have less students that need to exit our system to get the services that they need. So I didn't know if that might be an area that we should sort of address as well.
Yeah, that one, where I see that one fitting is under the unique programming on instructional practices, number 2, unique programming for unique learning needs. And that would be, for instance, do we have an autism program that families would find is very robust, so they may choose to stay in Greenwich because they feel like it's specialized programming. And that's an area I would like, it would be those sorts of areas that they would look at for us under that unique programming piece.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands for board members. Anybody else want to pile on? And Tony, do you think you have what you need from us?
I think so. I'm going to mark pre-K off based on the comments, just because there'll be one thing less that they will have to review. So I will update this, get it in the actual RFP, and we will put it out there and see who responds.
I mean, I'm concerned about the timing just due to COVID. I do know a lot of this will depend on their ability to get into our buildings, but be hopeful to make sure we have them on board sooner than later. Mr. Scher.
Tony, a big part of this for our board has been, as Mr. Bernstein said, our legal obligations. You know, in Greenwich, we go so far beyond our legal obligations, but it's a critical baseline. You're probably not aware, but it's been an open, ongoing question. You know, if you're trying to reduce scope, what I would do, I agree with Peter. We struggled with this. I'll fully disclose. I agree with Peter. We should get this answer, but we need this as an independent answer. Our current attorneys are so wrapped up in what they've already advised Greenwich that I didn't find them to be a reliable source. Unfortunately, the state of Connecticut as a state is really bad compared to other states in terms of documenting to boards of education what their obligations are. As an example, we looked at ESY, we went out to the state of Wisconsin. They send you a 50-page manual for boards of ed. You call up in Connecticut and ask for it, and they don't have anything. So my point with all of it is I agree with Peter. I think that would be comprehensive, but maybe that could be handled outside the scope of this project, and that it's something that we could do separately through the legal department. It's something I think we need, but maybe if you're looking for scope, it could be handled another way. And I think Peter's idea of a up-to-date kind of library that's a resource for the board for governance is a really good idea. So maybe you talk to the town attorney and see if it's something they could take on, and then you don't have to put it in the scope of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Peter, for agreeing with me. I don't think it's just for the board. I think it's also for our staff, because they really do need to know what their obligations are, and that requirements document should transfer to our policy manual for provision of services. They really should tie together. Ms. Hirsch.
Oh, I was just going to say, in reference to what Mr. Scher was just suggesting, I think that might also be a really good area for SEEK to the SEEK committee to be taking a look at in documents that they can be able to create for parents as well. I know it's really important for our educators to for our educators to have every up-to-date legal requirement. It's one of the areas in our last review that we were cited for, that our internal documents were not as up-to-date as they should be. But it may be an area that I don't know if that's something, but at least for parent guidance that SEEK might be able to help with.
Right. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move on to our next item. Tony, thank you for moving this along. This is certainly a long time coming, and I know a lot of people are waiting. So thank you for taking this on among the many other things you were taking on. All right, so moving forward on our agenda, the next item is budget adjustments. As we dispensed with this on Tuesday, we had added it to our agenda tonight just in case we weren't ready to go on Tuesday. Some good news, we don't need to discuss it again. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone this indefinitely. Is there a second? Ms. Downey is the second. All right, hearing no discussion, I'll take the roll call. So Bernstein's a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly? Joe?
Yes.
Joe's a yes. All right, Kowalski?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
And Scher.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item is Cardinal Stadium. So this is actually listed as an action item in the event we're told there's something we need to do. We don't actually know that there's anything we need to do, but having taken this up multiple times before, we thought we'd do that as belt and suspenders. So Dr. Jones, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our guests and give us an update on where we are in Cardinal Stadium.
We have Russ Davidson and Tom Hagee, our land attorney, on tonight, and they are here to walk you through. They're going to show a few slides, and this really is to answer Board of Education questions so you understand where we are in the process and what it might look like moving forward. So I'll turn it over. I know Mike is presenting, I believe.
Hi there, Russ Davidson, KG&D. How are you guys?
Hang on one second, Russ. We're getting some feedback. So whoever's not speaking, you can mute Mike.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
So we have a brief slideshow for Peter and Joe and Tony and Dan and Sean, who've been involved. A lot of this isn't new, but you may have heard around town that we've been very busy trying to push the Cardinal Stadium project forward. So Mike, if you go to the next slide. So the goal right now is to get as many approvals for phase 1 or parts thereof as soon as possible. So if you don't have a fall sports season, this project can be under construction when the field is not in use. So just as a reminder, phase 1 was recommended by the committee that was formed late last year, and the recommendations were adopted by the board. It includes the new home side bleachers, the buildings underneath the bleachers, improvements to the driveway, a handicapped parking lot, a new entry kiosk, replacement of the sports lighting fixtures, and then related site development and landscaping. So back in March, we met with a couple of bleacher vendors on state contract when we were being optimistic and thought maybe the bleachers could get replaced over the summer. This is the pre-COVID optimism. And the administrators and our team met with two different vendors and looked at price and quality. And one was selected, and we asked them to produce some design studies and shop drawings only. And that would have been necessary. That's necessary to keep things moving, and they'll be necessary in any event. We then put a concept plan and went to the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 7th. And then we went on to the Board of Selectmen on April 9th, who referred us to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And at this point in the process, your architect was thrilled that you brought on an excellent local land use attorney, Tom Hegney. So I'm going to let him talk about the next few bullets.
Thanks very much, Russ. Good evening, everyone. When I came on, we were going to just appear in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on May 19th. And at the time, I thought that we might just apply for a variance for the additional square footage. That had been the process for, frankly, the science building when I was on the building committee for that back in the 90s, and for MISA. And so we went to the commission meeting and they said, no, we really want you to rezone, apply to rezone this property from the 1 acre zone, which is what most of the land at the high school is, to the half-acre zone or the R20 zone. So we filed that application, notified all the abutting property owners, and that's what was on the Planning and Zoning Commission agenda on June 16th. And we had that along with the municipal improvement, which has to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission after requested by the Board of Selectmen, and the site plan to actually build the new seats and team rooms, and most importantly, lavatory facilities, which have never existed there since the field was first installed. The Planning and Zoning Commission, I think, was receptive to the plan. They wanted the public to have a little bit more time to feel comfortable about the rezoning. As I pointed out at that meeting, rezoning it from a half acre to half acre is not going to add more houses because there aren't going to be any houses. It's not going to change the use because it's still going to be the town's only public high school. And I thought by and large they were receptive to that. But Joe's comment there was, well, we don't want to push you tonight, which I think was a very wise one. And so we're on for next Tuesday, the 30th, for the municipal improvement, the site plan, and the rezoning. We have also received positive comments from the Architecture Review Committee as to the stands and the team rooms, and they want us to move ahead. They had some comments on landscaping, and the ticket kiosk got probably the most discussion, and Russ has, as part of the slides here, a couple of other examples that I think that they will be impressed with seeing. We had to go to the Board of Appeals for a height variance for the new press box and the elevator tower to make the press box handicap accessible. The Board of Appeals was very supportive and approved that back on June 10th. So as we go forward, this is our so-called phase 1A. So it's the stands, the team room, lavatories, and without a lot of other site work. The site work is being reviewed by the Architecture Review Committee, but the Planning and Zoning Commission said, we'll just approve what you need right now. Come back to us as phase 1B with the rest of the site work, such as the handicapped parking lot and the driveway. There are a couple of outstanding items there in terms of drainage, in terms of sewer and traffic that we need to address. And then come back later with phase 2 which includes the relocation of the parking lots, the driveway from the main parking lot in the rear of the school out to East Putnam Avenue, and redoing the visitor stands, as well as preparing team room and lavatories for the visitor side as well. So that is going to involve, again, all of the reviews that the Planning and Zoning Commission is going through now on phase one, along with the wetland agency, since we're crossing the stream that goes along the west and southerly parts of the campus. That will be a longer process. It will involve some soil testing to make sure that any contaminated soil that's being disturbed through the process is removed. And we'll have the same issues of drainage and traffic and sewer to review with the various town departments as part of that. That's probably something we would be looking to submit in September, whereas phase 1B, we would look to try to accomplish through the summer. So that sort of brings you up to speed as to where we are and where I think we are going to be going over the next several months.
So if you go to the next slide, Mike, we wanted to review just some of the things that came up with the Architectural Review Commission, so you know what's going on with the project. As was mentioned, they had some issues with the entry kiosk, and they wanted to see a little bit of design exploration on it. They also were curious if we could lower or flatten the roof of the elevator tower, which we were able to do, and explore ways to conceal the underside of the bleachers. They thought the space between the building and the bleachers was unattractive. They also felt that the ramps to the bleachers could have been simplified, and that the landscaping wasn't quite elaborate enough on each side of the bleachers, and they wanted a little bit more shade on the hills. So if you go to the next slide, this is the rendering that we plan to show to the Architectural Review Commission. It's different from what you had seen earlier in that the elevator tower is slightly lower with a flat top as opposed to a sloping top. But the red versus white versus red, white, red is what the bleacher coloring will be. And the entry plaza. You'll also see on the left where you see a cardinal in a white triangle. We're going to show them a stretched fabric, very similar to what you'll see as a windscreen on a tennis court, that we'll price for you as a bid alternate to enclose that area. If you go to the next slide. And this is from the rear. You can see that that fabric does fill in the space between the building and the bleachers. It's pretty attractive, but it's undoubtedly costly. This also shows the simplified ramp, a little bit of articulation on this entry plaza, which the Architectural Review Commission was very concerned with. So our landscape architect came up with an idea for sort of a concrete frame with paver bricks in the center, which could be an opportunity for donor bricks. And the retaining wall at the toe of the slope there is a seat wall with a little set of stairs that comes up, which will allow people to get onto the grass and picnic under the shade. We also clarified that there is no curb between the building and the food trucks, so that when the food trucks are in and games are underway, that will function as one flat and level plaza. We go to the next slide. This just shows how the elevator tower was flattened and that you still can't see the roof of the elevator tower when you're on Putnam Avenue. So the roofing will not be exposed. Next slide. The only change here, if you look at the ramps on the other side with the red bubbles around them, they are straight switchback ramps. So we lengthened the top run, which allowed us to shorten the bottom run and avoid an L that sort of stuck out into the entry plaza, which was a concern to the Architectural Review Commission. We were, again, we're working with a standard bleacher set of kit of parts, but we were able to get the bleacher manufacturer to make this modification. It has no cost impact. Next slide. This rendering shows some additional trees, the little cluster of trees with the black lines right around the plaza for the food court, and then 4 trees that are further up the hill that the Architectural Review Commission thought it would be nice to have a little bit more shade on that hill. Our landscape architect promised to give it a try, but there is a lot of rock in that area, so that'll be pending a little exploration. And the next slide. So you'll see that we're showing the West Plaza and the East Plaza. The renderings you've seen are all the East Plaza, which is how people arrive at the game. The Architectural Review Commission was also concerned that there be a similar sized area on the west of the bleachers. We did not necessarily agree with them, thinking that people are going to come from the east and load the bleachers. It's not quite the way it is today, where a lot of people walk across the front and load from the far side. But we agreed to look at it, and in our meeting with the Peter and Joe and administrators, that will also be priced as an alternate. So if it's affordable within the budget, it can be realized. And we'll share that with the Architectural Review Commission. And the next slide. This is just a couple of sections that show that seat wall and the little stairs that go up and the herringbone pattern that will be the infill. So a little bit more articulation to that plaza, which should please the Architectural Review Commission. And the next. So this gets to the discussion of the entry kiosk. So this is the kiosk that we had designed and reviewed with the, with the board representatives and administrators. We felt that it was sort of suitable for Greenwich. It certainly is traditional. The Architectural Review Commission basically said, we believe this to be kind of safe and too traditional. They did agree it was very Greenwich. They asked if other options were explored or put before the board. And the answer was no, we really developed this one and obtained approval for this one. So we went back to the drawing board a little bit at their request. And the next slide. So at Greenwich High School, you've got a lot of exposed concrete columns, sort of wooden beams and wooden ceilings. And then on the lower right, you'll see at MISA, you have sort of angled aluminum and metal. And again, a good amount of this sort of attractive red brick with recesses every so often. And you go to the next slide. So this was one version that sort of picked up on some of the imagery of the high school that has similar brick piers, would have a wood underside to the canopy, and some concrete columns, if you go to the next slide. So the rendering on the upper left is what it would look like from the field side. And the photos on the right are just details of similar canopies and how it would be constructed. So when we showed this to the administrators, this was not the preferred selection, but we feel like we need to show the ARC everything that was explored. And on to the next slide. So we also looked at this option, which relates a little bit better to the buildings under the bleachers. It has a vertical element that sort of emulates the elevator tower with the cardinal on it. It's still a canopy, and it has a roof that sort of turns down to become a wall on the right side. So it has one portal and one ticket window. And in our meeting with administrators and board members, it was pointed out to us that this is not unlike what has been proposed to you at the Greenwich High School entrance. So this was developed, and so I think what we heard from our meeting with Greenwich folks was that either option 1 or option 3 probably would be acceptable. And that's what we're going to show all of this to the Architectural Review Commission and see what their comments are. If you go to the next slide. So I think that Tom probably gave you better dates, but we'll be for the Architectural Review Commission next July 1st, and back before Planning and Zoning. I think that's going to be before the 14th, Tom. If I think I have the date wrong there.
We're going for phase 1A. We're going to go back next Tuesday on the June 30th.
Okay. And then we'll keep after it for phase 1B. And then we had told the Board of Selectmen we would be coming in for phase 2. So we'll be preparing documents for phase 2 and expect to be trying to get on their agenda for August 27th, which would mean that the serious reviews with Planning and Zoning would be in September, as Tom had mentioned. You're going to see some things happening out on site. We need to have an agency come out and take videos of storm and sanitary pipes to confirm that they're in good shape and can handle the new loads of the stadium project. We're going to be looking to dig some holes and do percolation testing for the storm drainage design. The storm drainage design turned out to be the biggest hurdle in getting all of phase 1 approved at one time. The DPW reviewer really wants to see how we are going to deal with drainage in both phases before they approve any one phase. We're also going to need some additional test borings for the bridge to determine the structural capacity of the soil. And we're going to need some soil quality testing in that area as well, which we'll need to coordinate with AECom, who has control of that on your site. So if everything goes well with phase 1A and someone makes a decision that there's definitely no fall sports season, then the bleacher building construction can start in the fall and you'll see real construction activity out there. If there's a possibility of a fall sports season, or if there is a fall sports season, then the existing bleacher shoring is going to remain, and the bleacher and building construction will start in the winter of 2020 and head through the spring of 2021. So that's our update. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, board members, if you have questions. So Russ, I know we've talked about the entryway a little bit. I still like number 1. And I know you want to present the multiple designs. You know, if we as a board, I don't know, like number 1, would that sway them at all?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, let's hear from board members. So Mr. Sheriff.
Can we go back to those slides, Mike?
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about 1 versus 3, but
if you have an opinion, it's good to hear it.
You know, I just like something that's architecturally cohesive with the site. We don't, I mean, I never saw this. I mean, I'm sure I saw it before, but I never commented on it. You know, it's super traditional. It looks like, you know, if you've ever been to Disneyland, right? It looks like a kiosk at Disneyland. Nothing wrong with that. It's very traditional. Disney does a great job designing things. But to your point, Russ, the rest of the high school is done in a very modern, more modern type of way, not this traditional design. But I don't care. I care that this project gets done. So if anybody else feels strongly about it, have at it.
It was a surprise to us that this became a flashpoint at the ARC meeting.
Yeah, yeah. I always find it odd that there's a group of people who are busy opining on this stuff, but whatever. There are people who care, so let them care. I actually had, Peter, not questions about this. I had questions about some things our attorney said. So did you want to deal with this and then we can come back to that, or how do you want to handle this?
We could take it all up. So why don't you go ahead?
Can you go back one, I'm sorry, not on the plan itself, to the approval slide?
Second slide.
Yeah. It's Tom, right? Hi, Tom.
Yes, hi, Peter.
I guess I had a couple of questions. There's a lot of folklore around this site. I got involved with the prior board. Peter and I are probably the only two left, where we went through a torturous process with our attorneys to understand obligations that the board had relating to this site. There had been a lot of statements made about what our obligations were, prior agreements made, had they been honored. A good example would be, an uncontroversial one would be, when we got our MISA approval, we agreed to a set of landscaping plans that apparently we've never fulfilled. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm using that as an example. But you hear these things as you go along. One of the things the prior board had done is there was a lot of folklore around a stipulated agreement we had made relating to when prior boards had installed lights at Cardinal Stadium. And it was kind of interesting to actually read that agreement, see what's in it and what is in it, and then also what's not in it. There's a lot of folklore about what's people assert is in it that actually isn't in it. So in that context, I had really a question about this rezoning. And my question is, which I've never done a property, so I have to apologize in advance, I'm a neophyte at this, is when you go in and you have to present a site plan as part of this process, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And typically the site plan, they ask for a whole site plan. They don't let you do them in parts. But it sounds like in this one, they're letting us do it in parts. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've explained to them, and we have a full site plan that shows phases 1 and 2, which we've shared with them.
Okay.
And in order to expedite the replacement of the existing condemned stands and putting some bathrooms and team rooms in, we separated into phase 1A, which really was a suggestion of the Planning and Zoning Commission members, which
Right.
That's the drainage issue, which Russ indicated was somewhat of a problematic issue to deal with, and just deal with what we needed. And that is dealt with through a drainage exemption form because we're not adding any additional coverage to the site.
Okay.
And even before that, it took a while for them to understand the difference between phase 1 and phase 2. They said, why don't you just make it all one?
Yeah, right.
They kind of understood that, look, phase 2 is not funded by BET for construction. So to keep them together would just really hold up the urgent need for the eventual approval of 100% of the funding for phase 1 and phase 2, which you don't.
So, but Tom, what they've done is they've said, hey, we've seen your whole plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's sufficient for now, I guess is what you're saying. And
in concept.
And then they will say, we had to present a more detailed plan for phase 1A. I guess we haven't submitted 1B yet, right? But we've submitted 1A, and it sounds like from here, they're like, okay, we're glad to take that as a package and we'll review that as a package.
Right, they understand where we're going ultimately.
Okay.
They understand the urgency of the replacement of the stands.
Mm-hmm.
They're supportive of that. They understand that phase 1B involves more drainage work that we need to resolve with the town engineer, which we're in the process of doing, but can't do between now and next Tuesday.
So here's my real question I have. We've had a series of approvals for the site in total, the whole GHS site, and we've had a series of approvals for individual things we've done over time since we originally built the building in the late 60s and opened it in the 70s, right? So my question is when you get an approval, if there were a set of conditions associated to that approval, and then they give you another approval, does that obviate the original conditions of the original approval, or do you have to kind of drag that along like a piece of baggage? Does that question make sense? So let's say, as example, when we went and did the lights, or when we first built Cardinal Stadium, in that planning approval, there were a set of conditions that they gave us, right? I mean, we just went through this, right? By looking at this site, clearly there's a whole bunch of conditions they write down and they attach to your approval. It's part of your approval, right? They'll say you will do this, your landscaping will be like that, you'll have this screening, you may have the second plaza, the road, they'll write it all down as part of our approval, right? Because it's all bulleted out, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've gotten prior approvals for this site. Like when we originally built the stadium, there must have been a P&Z approval.
True.
Okay. So my question is if we get this approval, does that essentially become the approval of record and we don't have to worry about any obligations that may or may not have been met in a prior approval?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
You know, if there was something involved with MISA, for example, that needs to be completed, that's separate and apart from this, which is a separate site plan approval and application and plan that's being considered now.
What about the stadium? So we're rebuilding the stadium. Are we still obligated by any of the prior things that would be in the initial approval for the stadium?
You know, I looked at the stipulation, and actually for the lawsuits that involved the lights, and I went over that with Special Counsel John Wetmore, in the town attorney's office, because there had been some questions that there were more things involved in that than just the lights.
Which isn't true.
And I asked them, well, is there another stipulation out there? And he said, no, there's only one, and it just involves the lights. So I don't think that is something that's an impediment to us going forward with this project.
I'm trying to get at two things. I'm trying to get out is the John Wetmore was brilliant with us as an attorney. He did a very capable job in advising the board. He went over extensively in executive session so I won't talk about the details, but he went over in detail the town attorney's opinion regarding that stipulation, which helped the board a lot. We had asked him at that time, and this was public too, so I'm not disclosing anything or breaking seal, to scour the archives for any other stipulations. And they reported back that there are none other in the town of Greenwich's possession. So they're not familiar with any others that may have ever been done. So I think they did their homework for us as a board. The thing that I was trying to figure out, is there any other whammy that might pop up and hit us in the head? Because I think, as you know, we're very anxious to get this project moving forward.
Short answer, no.
Okay, great.
Any decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission can be modified by them in the future, unless there is such a court case and stipulation that's involved, where you'd have to work it out with a party on the other side and with the court. But none of that exists as part of what you're looking to do here.
Peter, I see a couple of other hands, so do you mind if we turn?
No, I'm done. I'm done. I really wanted to get underneath that because I want this project going forward. And I think you and I are the only ones on the board who have any familiarity with this issue. It probably bores the hell out of everybody else. I just don't want to get us stopped as we're starting to get up to speed.
Yeah. All right, Miss Downey.
Hi. Okay, I have a couple of questions relating to the kiosk. I'll bring it back to the kiosk. We only take tickets, and this is maybe a administration question, at home football games. Is there any other event that we take tickets? Does anybody know?
I do. We do that for playoff games, and we check IDs and charge entry for football games. I think it's $5.
Right. So there's limited. Okay, let's say there's probably 15 events a year we're talking about, correct? I'm gonna make up a number. My question is, you know, in terms of, I know we have to have one, but in terms of the cost of putting one in. And Russ, I don't know if you have a sense of option 1 versus option 2 versus option 3. In terms of our aesthetics can sometimes give way to cost. So I just didn't know if you had some sense of scale of the 3 options you're presenting in terms of cost.
Well, first of all, let me tell you where the entry kiosk came from. Because when you went away to buildings under the bleachers, this came back at the 11th hour, and it said, please include an entry kiosk in phase 1. And the placeholder budget of $150,000 was established.
Mm-hmm.
We believe you can do this for that. Options 2 and 3 have a much larger footprint and canopy, and they're probably going to cost more. You can see that this stretches, you know, 25 feet, and option 3 stretches even further, or a similar distance. So option 1 is probably the least costly.
Okay. Because that definitely, to me, would affect, I mean, just in terms of usage, if it's a space that's only used a small number of times a year, even if we like other things aesthetically, to me, it seems like just kind of bang for the buck. To your point about if, depending on whether or not we have fall sports, you said we would, if we do have them, construction would begin in the winter and would go through the spring of 2021. So what usability of the field would we have during that time frame? And in terms of graduation?
Well, I think in any event, you should have new bleachers for graduation next year, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
The field and track are not being altered, at least so far. So the field and track will be usable throughout the construction process.
And we would have the visitor side bleachers available for spectators for spring sports.
Correct.
Okay. Then another question I had was, okay, by bifurcating it into this stage 1A, 1B, what kind of assurances do we have that 1B will actually get approved? Because I think we all agree it's important to have accessibility of the stadium in terms of parking and whatnot. So I understand there's drainage issues and it's more complicated, but how comfortable should we feel that, yeah, we've already bifurcated it into 1 and 2, and now going 1A, 1B, we've split that.
I would say pretty comfortable, that it's not a question of if, it's a question of how the storm drainage is dealt with. And really it's also a question of, do you pay for and install storm drainage improvements at the end of phase 1B that you come back at the beginning of phase 2 in a year or 2 and dig up and throw away?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we've been trying to avoid. And I'm not sure that DPW will take it on faith that phase 2 is coming. So
Okay.
That's
Okay.
really the issue.
Okay.
I would agree with Russ that it's really more dealing with the technical aspects of the drainage than it is anything else. I'm not hearing from the commission that they have an issue, but they want us to be able to move along with the stands and the team room. And they weren't comfortable with what they were hearing about the drainage and also with how the exit drive was handled on to East Putnam.
We did make good progress on the exit drive, and I feel like that issue is pretty much resolved, actually. Meetings with DOT, and I think the configuration of that driveway at Putnam Avenue is not going to be an issue any longer. But that really, the phase 1B issue really comes down to storm drainage and the fact that, you know, they want us to put a camera in every storm drainage pipe that runs under this portion of the site. They want us to put a camera in the sanitary sewer line that runs under the playing field to make sure it can handle the flows. That sanitary sewer line runs under the corner of the bleachers. We need to further reassure them that it will be okay. And, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And if you try and get people out there in a hurry to do this kind of thing,
Yeah.
it was not happening.
Okay. I'm not sure I want to look at what's on those cameras anyway.
It's fascinating. I've seen them. You don't.
No, I don't. I just want to go back to the kiosk. When you said the kiosk got added in, where did that come from? Was that from the committee, or I'm kind of going to go back to being hung up on the kiosk?
It came in as the committee process when the board's proposal was being compared and contrasted to a proposal that GAF had put together.
And then who said we need to add the kiosk? We, the board did?
The committee
Or we-
added it to the scope of
committee.
phase one.
Okay. Okay, thanks. That's it for me, Peter.
Christina, just to the point on the kiosk, the original design, the building itself would have been there, so there would have automatically been a ticket entryway. So the committee that completed its work in January, this was part of their recommendation.
Well, unfortunately, I like 2 and 3, but my wallet doesn't like them as much. So,
all right,
sorry.
so that's a vote for 1. All right, good to hear.
Not because I like it, but because, to me, it's about value for if we have to have one and usage. So,
all right, all right,
You can also
Mr.
say that you prefer to, but unless you get donations for it, you can't afford to build it.
All right, Mr. Kelly, you spent a lot of time with this. Want to share?
Sure. Christina, to answer your question about the kiosk and the usage, I've been, as you know, to a bunch of stadiums, kind of most of them in certainly Fairfield County. And it's kind of normal to have an entry point, not necessarily for selling tickets, but sometimes you have programs that you hand out. You have it's a formality where sometimes you set up a table and it doesn't look as nice as an entryway where everyone's coming in, and it presents very well. So is it worth $150,000 to put it in there or so? I would say yes, because it's the center point. You don't have to set up that table, and sometimes you have things, and it just really tidies things up some and just makes it much nicer. So to answer that, it's used all the time, but not always for selling tickets, just as an entry point. To everyone else, the committee now, the group that's working on this project, is focused and moving forward. The things we're going through, and as many of you know, I've personally put a number of projects together and brought them to the finish line. Those projects were personally owned by me, so therefore there was no confusion on what the finish line was. Right now, the most important thing, and I think what gets us to the finish line, is the Board of Education staying unified and working together to get to the finish line. Now, there are at times different groups that might have conversations with certain members or different members of the Board of Ed. Right now, as long as we all can agree on what we want, continue to look forward, this project will get there. The things we're talking about, the drainage, the cameras in the poop cameras in the sewers, things like that, that's quite normal. P&Z always puts these challenges forward, makes things a little difficult, but they kind of grant these things in my experience. Now, certainly Tom and Russ have much more experience in such matters, but I'm sure they can agree that these things that are put in front of us right now are very normal and what usually happens in certainly major projects. So as long as the Board of Education continues to want to finish this project as we're working on it, I believe it will get there. So I'm quite optimistic. We'll continue to push forward. We keep together and we work together. This thing gets done in short work.
All right, and Joe, thank you for your service. Joe's been going to all of these P&Z, Zoning Board of Appeals, Architecture Review Committee meetings. If you think our meetings are a little crazy. Anyway, Ms. Hirsch.
Oh, well, Ms. Downey actually got to my initial question, which was what was the cost differential between the 3 options on the kiosk? You know, I know you'd asked us for our thoughts. I do like option 1, but after looking at some of the pictures, option 3 is nice as well. Option 2 just does not sit with me. But and I agree with Mr. Kelly that it is nice to have an entry point for multiple different reasons, and I do think it is needed and necessary. But so then the question would be is if we were looking at option 1 versus option 3, for instance, Russ, do you have an idea of around about what the cost differential is, or ways if we prefer option 3, or I should say the Architectural Review Board prefers option 3, ways to reduce some of the cost in that?
We haven't really gone that far because we're sort of really working on the fly here. You know, we were focused when we went to Architectural Review Commission of getting approval for the bleachers and the buildings, on which they had almost no comments. So we took that off. We took the kiosk off the table, said we'd come back to them. You know, it really all depends on the builder and the bids, and we're not going to know, but just based on the overall disturbance of the site, I would say it's probably on the order of 50% more. So you might be up to 225 from 150. But our experience is that these little buildings, even looking at this saying that's $150,000, I'm sure there's people saying, how can that be? It's so small. But it's got every construction trade, but just not very much of it. You know, all these kiosks are proposed to be unheated, uninsulated. You know, you achieve air conditioning by opening the windows. And if it's super cold, bring an electric heater and plug it in. And that's one way we're trying to save money for you. But that's the order of magnitude difference.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
This is great. Joe, you've done an amazing job. Hopefully you're going to get this to the finish line. I believe in you. I don't need to micromanage this. I frankly liked option 1. I like it even more now that I know the price. So go forth, do what you do. And, you know, let's be rocking graduation in the spring together, 2021 there. So thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Russ. I've gotten to know you way too much. So I'm really happy with this. Thank you.
All right, so it's Peter Bernstein. Russ, thank you for noting that the work with ACOM. I know there's a lot of people that hear, anytime they hear anything about disturbing the soil on the high school property, there's a concern. And I know working with ACOM and our DPW folks is a big step in the direction of making sure that's not a obstacle for us.
Yep.
I had a question from somebody in the community about the piles of dirt that are in the area that we have slated for the handicap parking. I believe the plan is to use those on the fields at the high school. They're clean. I think they're tagged for use, but I don't know what the timeline is. Do you have any sense of that?
I don't. I know that they're tested clean and that they're planned for use somewhere else.
Right. They're going to be used on the property.
And they're clean.
Yes, that's the key part. Yes, thank you. All right. Other board members have questions? All right, seeing none. Tom, I want to welcome you back to the board. Mr. Yanni was a former Board of Education member who's gone on to do other things in his life, but I'm sure he's glad he's only here for one meeting.
It was interesting having 2 full-time jobs for about 4.5 years. And then jumping on a number of building committees. I think I chaired 5 of them and sat on 9 of them, including the science building and the administration at the high school that I think we met every other week for 10 years. So there's some plaque somewhere that has our names on it in memorial to us.
Well, if you're interested, we got a couple building projects coming up.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. And I did graduate from what I still call the new high school with the head of school, Ralph Mayo. So I'm familiar with this property in more ways than one.
Thank you for that. All right, so we'll close out that item. The next item, as I mentioned before, transfers we're not ready for. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone that to a future meeting. And by the way, I think the presentation, Mike Antonaccio, if you have it, you're posting it to Board Docs.
I will post it at the end of the meeting, yes.
Yes, that will be posted on Board Docs for members of the public that are looking for that. All right, so on the transfers, I'm going to make a motion to postpone this indefinitely, and then we'll deal with how to take it up. Can I get a second for that motion? Ms. Stowe is a second. All right, so Bernstein's a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kowalski. I don't know if I see Karen. Oh, there she is. Karen, are you?
Oh,
at-
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, that's a yes. Sorry, my reception is bad tonight for some reason.
Thank you. No worries. All right, Olson
Yes.
and Cher. All right. So
Yeah.
before we get a motion from Mr. Kelly to end the shenanigans, just a couple of things. There's some written reports. I want to thank the PTA Council for their annual report. Really sums up a lot of work for our students by the parents in the community. Thank you very much for supporting our students. Very important. If you look at it, you'll see just the great lengths they've gone to do that. The other category in written reports, it's tagged other written reports. You'll see our executive summaries from some of the areas that we did not have time to discuss in these special meetings for the past few months. In talking to Tony and Kathleen in a chair meeting, we thought it was worthwhile to one, provide the board with some summer reading, just like our students. You have an assignment, but two, to not forget about those areas that we really did want to take a look at. As you review those, if you have questions, you should certainly submit them to Tony. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I didn't make it all the way through because there is a lot of material. But we're also thinking about how we plan our agenda for next year. So if there are topics in there that you want to take up, let Kathleen know that so that we can try to figure out how to get that on there. With that is all we've got for tonight. I want to remind people that we are going to meet as a board to hear from the superintendent and team on reopening plans. The governor had a press conference today where he said a little, and I guess there'll be more coming from the governor and the commissioner of education on Monday. So the first meeting is July 13th, and I think the next one is the 27th. If something comes up in between then, we'll let you know and schedule a meeting as needed. All right, Mr. Kelly, did you have a motion for us?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to second that, Mr. Kelly, and we'll take a quick roll call vote. Bernstein's a yes. Stowe?
Yes, happy 4th.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes, sir.
Kowalski?
Bad reception.
I know, bad reception. We'll give her a second.
Yeah, no, it's a yes. Sorry. Again, it times out every time you want to hear from me. I don't know what's going on. Maybe the internet doesn't like the sound of my voice tonight.
or they just want us to meet longer, but that's okay. Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Keep watch. There's always more work to do. And have a good couple of weeks off.
Good night, all.
Good night. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.